welcome everybody to the Audit Finance and Risk sessions this afternoon. A windy afternoon it is as well. I guess we have all been warned of that weather risk, so that's one thing we can tick off. I don't think it was an item on our list. I'll begin with open prayer. I'll do that myself. E te atua e hoa, homai ki a mātou te whakaaro nui. Te matauranga mō te maia ke tō whakatautika ki te awawhina i a mātou iwi katoa o tēnei rohe, aki, ameni.
Amen.
Many.
I should have not tried to go from memory. So thank you, everybody. Do I have any apologies? I think everybody is here. I can't see everybody at once, so it's a bit of a trick. I don't think anybody is away. Is that correct?
Correct, as far as I'm aware, Chair Visage.
No apologies. That's great. So we'll move straight on. Just before we do, though, we've got quite a few items to go through, and I'd like people to direct their comments and thoughts to the papers that are there, and specifically on questions and so on. And I'll give Bruce the leeway for a prize that he mentioned, but apart from that, we can just focus on what we're trying to achieve. So I'll begin by a confirmation of the previous minutes, which is on page 12. I'll move. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, Councillor Smith. I think it was Councillor Smith. And any corrections in the list there that we see, I'll take it as read. Any mistakes, corrections? No. All right, I'll put it to the vote then. And we're going to have to do voting as per normal, since we're online individually. So we're starting with myself. Yes. Just trying to read the writing. I've got the small screen here.
Aye.
And we have
Aye.
Aye, and John Carter's aye, and we have support.
Aye.
Councillor Stratford.
I'll abstain from this one.
Okay. Was there an error there you saw or not?
I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know what happened.
Thanks, Paul. And finally, member Adele.
Yes, aye.
So, unanimous. So we go to the first item, which is on 5.1. Now, before we move this, I would like, please, Janice, a little bit of a discussion of what's been trying to be achieved here and ask a question. And I'll start it off with a question. So a bit of a discussion to start with, and that is this money is from change to the Government Act. So if you can explain that, and you're planning to put it in a term deposit. So the question I actually have is, why not just simply pay down debt?
Okay.
I'm happy to move or second this if we need to do that first.
Happy to second.
It's an informal discussion to start with.
Okay.
I may, in case someone amongst the signal a different amendment to that, or change or different movement. So, Jenna?
Okay. So this has arisen due to the changes that were approved last year through the Rating of Whenua Maori Act amendment to the Rating Act. So in June, we wrote off a large amount of arrears on land that became unused and occupied. And as a result of that, we have had a windfall income of the 1.9 million of GST returned to council. And that came in August, because the GST claim is a month after the month end. So the GST claim was at the end of July. The reason that we don't just pay down debt is even though when we go through the accounts, we always treat debt as running for 20 years, the actual debt instruments that we hold that underlie that debt have different repayment periods. And I don't have any actual debt right now to repay. So the reason that I'm suggesting this goes into a term deposit is that it can earn some interest whilst we wait for the first due date to come round.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. All right, so I'm going to call now for a move and a seconder.
Happy to move.
Happy to move.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
No, you missed out the Mayor Carter.
Okay. No cause.
So now general debate and discussion. Janice, thanks for that, because I wanted you to explain that. Just so we're clear, that you're saying you can't pay down debt immediately. You've got to, there's no provision for that, that you're actually wanting to wait till the next payment, pay down period is due, and then you'll pay that down and collect interest in the meantime.
Correct.
Any other comments from anybody? Yeah,
Thank you,
Councillor
Chief Research. I had a couple of questions. Your question kind of answered one of them though, and I haven't done any accounting or business since third form, so I was like, what's going on here? My first question was, what are other councils doing, or did we get a steer at all from DIA on what is not the right thing to do? What is an appropriate thing to do with that money, or is it sort of like you get it back, do with it what you will? Like what's Gisborne, or why do our other councils that have large blocks of Māori freehold land who also would have got, I know that we're the biggest in the country though, but what, did we get any steer in that direction, Janice? That was my first question. And my other question was sort of answered. It was around interest from a term deposit versus the interest from debt, but I think that's been answered.
Okay, through you, Chair. No, there is no guidance from DIA on what's expected to happen in terms of GST refunds. And no, we haven't asked other councils. I'm not sure that the two councils mentioned have the same volume of unused and occupied land as us. When it comes to the position that we had, we were very different to Gisborne, even though the quantum of Maori freehold land was similar. The arrears and non-payment rates were very different. So I think we had significantly more unused and occupied in our area than they do in theirs.
Any other questions there, Moko?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, so just to follow up on that then, obviously we're going to put this into a term deposit, but is there any scope there where we as elected members can say, hey, we've just got $9 million in here? How could we actually spend that if it's not to pay down debt at this time? Or is this what is happening with this chunk of money?
We have it ring fenced as cash at the moment in a separate part of our bank account. It is actually on term deposit at the moment, so that it is earning interest, but it's only on a 89-day term deposit account at the moment. You have all of the decision making in this space. This is my recommendation to you, because the underlying debt that we have isn't going to disappear if we don't make some attempt to put some money on one side to repay debt in the future.
Not free money, in other words. Member
Can I comment on that?
And I just to follow up on that, if I can, Chair Research. To me, this is free money, because we knew we were never going to get that rating money in anyway, and we knew that that debt was going to be that debt for us to pay off anyway. And this is a $1.9 million of GST we got back that we, or am I wrong in my way of thinking in the space that this actually is, in essentially free money to some extent?
So can I answer that, John?
Yeah, okay.
John, what the councillors need to understand is that over what used to happen was that you had to pay your GST, and then in 6 years' time, when you wrote the debt off, you got a refund. What's happened is it's all come at once in 6 years, and so we've got a bulk sum. But we used to get a smaller amount, but we used to get it every year, and it was just in a part of our cash flow. So all that's happened is it's accumulated, and we've got it back in a big lump. And Janice is absolutely right. There's no other
Well,
council like this. in New
Meakata,
Zealand,
were those small,
but it's from general rate.
those 6-year small increments of GST back, did we use that to pay off debt like we're looking at doing for this amount, or
Yep. Or yeah.
Yeah.
or did
Primarily,
it just go on the kete or what?
no,
Because if that's
So
what
if I
usually happens, it makes sense for it to do
if
that.
I can
but if
hold
that's
the
not what happened-
conversation, if Moko, if I can just hold the conversation, as I understand Meerkat is correct, I'll just have you, Janice, since you're the expert in this, can you respond to what Meerkat has said and Moko, please?
Absolutely. Through you, Chair. Obviously, what Mayor Carter's just explained to you is totally correct. We would have been collecting this money in small bite sizes over 6 years as we wrote arrears off. What would happen is that would come into our bank account, so we wouldn't borrow as much going forward. So it would just remove the need for us to borrow when we had those refunds come through. So essentially, it is the same answer but slightly different. We wouldn't pay debt down, but we wouldn't take new debt either.
Thank
and
you.
it's
Janice.
towards one of my chocolate fish.
Member Edmonds, you were to say something, and then I think I had Kelly, Councillor Stratford had her hand up. No, I can't see it anymore. And then now I see Sean Clark. So that's the order that I see.
Okay, Janice, a question for you, and kind of in the back of my mind got an answer, and that is this is a $2 million income effectively, which is no different than $2 million in rates really for you. You know, the cash comes in, it goes to the bank account. My question is, are your accounts so finely tuned that this $2 million is you don't know what to do with it? I mean, are your accounts so that for every dollar you get in rates, you know where it's going in this quarter? You get my drift. I mean, because I mean, if people didn't pay their rates this term, or you got a few more rates or something, there would be a cash flow, right? And yet you don't come to us each 3 months saying, hey, look, I've got a little bit more. Can I put it on term deposit because I have nowhere to put it right now? Am I making myself clear, Janice? I mean, it's kind of why are you coming to the Audit and Finance Committee asking what are you going to do for $2 million for the next 6 months?
Okay, through you, Chair. Obviously, we're monitoring cash flow all the time to make sure that we've got enough money to ensure that we can pay bills and try and make sure that we don't borrow more than we need to. In this particular case, what I'm bringing to your attention is that because we've now written off the $14 million and we have an underlying debt balance that I have not been able to get below, I'm asking you to consider whether we want to make a strategic decision to collect money over time to repay that underlying debt, because it's we're not going to repay it in any other way. That's why I'm asking if this is an approach that you want to follow. And we'd start it with the 1.9 million GST refund. But it's something that we would discuss on an ongoing basis going forward as to how we would repay that underlying debt.
Okay, so so if I could rephrase what you've said, I think I understand. It's a question I think you and I have discussed in the past, and that is we have a bunch of debt that we don't have any income or rates income that is being allocated towards it. So whether we buy land's a good one. We don't depreciate land, so there's no income charged to rates that we can pay off the debt to land, for example. And what you're saying is we've now got a bunch of money that I guess we've had to borrow to pay GST. That is underlying debt, and we just put it back where it came from when the opportunity arises.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Edmonds. On my list now I have Councillor Stratford.
Thank you very much. Sorry, it looks like I'm frozen, but I'm on a couple screens here. What I think everybody has covered what I was going to ask, but I just want to state that we need to find a more effective way to do this going forward. We're going to have this each year, not so big a sum of GST, but in our LTP document, we put in there that there was an increase of rates to the general population because of the freehold Māori land remissions. It would make better sense to me that you know, this was taken into that, what's the word, applied to that amount so that we could have kept the rates down. And we knew that this was going to happen at LTP deliberations time. We had an idea of a roundabout sum, but it is a little late in the piece. But yeah, I would rather see it going towards reducing rates than sitting in a bank account accumulating funds. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. I think ultimately it will be in the next pay down period, reducing rates, our debt basically, and therefore future rate. Yep, Sean, did you drop your hand down? I think you're on my list next.
Yeah, no, look, I was just going to ask a technical question out loud for Janice. We may have discussed this, Janice, but I don't remember why we're not paying down debt and tagging the money because debt interest is higher than credit interest, and tagging the money so that we can reborrow it when we need it for the purposes that you've outlined. Why would we put it in a low interest bearing, current environment, low interest bearing credit situation instead?
I thought I'd explain that at the front of the paper. We don't have any debt to physically repay at the moment. When we borrow debt,
we have $46 million with that. In fact, we have more than that at the moment. Well, more than that at the moment. And so, you know, when we rate for depreciation and we have that income every set of rates, we don't have it sitting in a deposit that is a reserve that people can call on. We instead pay down debt because debt interest rates are higher than credit rates. And then we redraw on it when we renew the asset. Why would we not do a small version of that for the same rationale?
Because our underlying debt instruments with the local government funding agency are not due for repayment at this time. So I can't physically pay debt when it isn't due. We agree to take underlying debt for periods between a year and 10 years, sometimes depending on the interest rates that you get for the longer term borrowing. I don't have any current debt to repay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Janice. And that's why I asked the question at the beginning. Councillor Smith, I have next, and then Mayor Carter after Councillor Smith.
And me again, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Janice, thank you for this report. I have to admit, when I read it, I was left wanting for the other options. In my mind, it would have been great to see more than one option, because for me, it's not really a decision-making paper if we've only got one option. If you discount doing nothing as no option, because it's not an option, we can't do nothing with effectively $2 million. So I was left wanting for the other technical options that you could have recommended to us. So two questions. My first question, I think, is similar to what Councillor Stratford has raised. Why do we not have some kind of policy approach to this, acknowledging that this is a semi-one-off situation, but going forward, and how does it align with our financial strategy? Apologies, could somebody just mute Maddie? And then my second question is whether or not there are any other options that you could outline to us. And I acknowledge that Councillor Tepania has raised one in the chat in terms of repaying the depreciation decrease. Also not an accountant, so I'd just be interested to know if there are other options in alignment with our financial strategy that we could be considering, or if this is simply our only option.
Through you, Chair, I'll take the second question first, I think, because that might then deal with the first question. What I've put forward to you is what I believe is the most appropriate approach given the underlying debt situation. That doesn't mean that we can't keep this money on hand for a period of 12 months. And then you put that, if you like, in the pot to reduce rates going forward. you could decide that you wanted to use, or there's operational need during the year that we want to use some of the money towards that. It would be a one-off reduction. It's not an ongoing position. But those options do exist if council wants to put up an alternative, or actually just decline this, and then we come back to you with more options. Does that answer your questions?
Mayor Carter?
Apologies. Sorry, Mr. Chair, Janice just asked if that answered my question, so I was just wanting to respond, if possible, please.
Okay, yeah.
Janice, to a degree it did, but I am keen to understand why we don't have a policy that guides this kind of decision making.
I'm going to answer that question.
We don't have a policy because this has never happened before in this magnitude. The money that we would get from statute barred write-offs on an annual basis is not significant enough to warrant a policy to do something with. This is a one-off outcome of the change to the Rating Act. So this is not going to be something that's ongoing into the future.
And John, that's exactly what I was going to say. Please don't make this bigger than Ben-Hur. It's a one-off. We normally get 200,000 or 300,000 a year back from our GST, and it's just dealt with under normal circumstances, and it will continue next year. We'll get that same amount, 200 or 300. This is a one-off. Janice has given us exactly the right recommendation. It's a one-off.
And I agree with you, Mayor Carter. I have Will with his hand up, and I believe I heard you, Member Edmonds, as well. So if you can speak up, Will.
Just very briefly, Chair, when Janice drafted the report, we discussed it, and many of the issues which have been talked about today, we discussed then. If I was to sum up Janice's approach to this, it's like any good chief finance officer. The key word is prudence.
That's right.
It's a prudent approach, and that this is, as Mayor Carter says, this is not something which is recurring. Of course, members can do what they like with this, but you would expect your chief finance officer to make this recommendation.
Exactly.
And Member Edmonds next, and then I'm going to call this to the end. I just wonder, Matty, if you wanted to say something after Member Edmonds.
Yeah, I'd just like to, I think Rachel Kelly and Moko might have got a bit confused, I guess, as where the money came from in the first place. I mean, when we receive rates, we also receive GST from the customers, from the ratepayers, which goes to the government. But when we don't receive rates, invoice rates, we've also got to send the GST on that to the government. And the only place we get that from is borrowed money, right? The council borrows the money to pay the GST it didn't get. So when in 6 years' time we actually get the GST, effectively all we're doing is we're repaying the borrowing that we borrowed to get the GST in the first place. So, I mean, there's no other place for it to go than tend to repay the debt, repay the reason we borrowed it. I mean, and normally it's a very short thing, right? I mean, when we get the GST, we just pay it on. There's no borrowing, or when it's late, we borrow it and we pay it back in 90 days. So no, there's no other place for it to go.
Excellent, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Then why are we being asked?
Well, because we've got the sum of money in our hand, we have to make a decision.
Yeah, it is
just
a government
decision.
So,
just giving support to our staff.
No
Can
other.
I just add something? Yes, one last
very
comment.
quickly.
Yeah, one of the reasons that this report was asked to come to us was because there was talk of it being applied towards some of the incentivising Māori land tranches of work. But my understanding is that we have enough budget within council to enable that work stream anyway, so we do not need to apply this funding there.
Okay, so I'm now going to put it to the. Is that you, Matty? Did you want to make a comment at all?
Yeah, look, you as chairman, you need to cut down on this waffling.
Thanks, Matty. I'll take that on board. I think there was a bit of concern about all of this. Okay, all in favour? Oh, actually, sorry, I better go through the list again.
Did someone move it?
Aye.
Can you read? So
I can read it if you help.
Yeah, please do that. Yeah.
Chair Vucic.
Yeah, aye.
Member Robertson.
Aye.
Mayor Carter.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Court.
Aye.
Councillor Radic. Councillor Radic.
Aye.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
Councillor Tepania.
In favour.
Member Edmonds.
Aye.
Member Gardner.
Absolutely support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we move to item 5.2 on page 21 in your agenda. Can I have a move and a seconder for that, please?
I'll move.
Thank you, Mayor Carter. Seconder. I'll second
Second,
then.
Kelly.
Oh,
Get out of here.
Councillor Stratford.
What's up?
Seconder. So comments. Tanya,
What
do you
about
want
that waffle in the background?
to? Yeah. Matty, can you keep that noise down, please? So I will take this as read. So let's go straight to any questions people actually have. And let's again focus specifically on this agenda. I'm just reminding everybody that we've got a lot in front of us and we've been told off by Matty already. That's great, no questions. I see any hands? No questions. They're all right then. We've been through, maybe I can add that we've been through it on page.
Rachel just raised her hand, John.
Rachel,
You asked questions
Councillor
on
Smith.
5.2.
Yeah, we are on 5.2, yeah.
Oh, well, I've got at some stage. Can I put my hand up?
Yeah, so if you, Bruce, can go after Councillor Smith. So Councillor Smith.
Apologies, Mr. Chair. I think I was in the same situation as Bruce, so I'm happy for him to go first. I'm just trying to wrap my head around my notes. Connectivity's challenged.
So
Thank you, Rachel. I've and I found the workshop very valuable. And perhaps I only have really, in some sense, a couple of comments because the workshop answered probably my primary question around as the AR 004 versus what do you propose as 14. And I do think, and I would note with some respect to the work that the Infrastructure Committee does, that we do adopt this as an additional strategic risk for, I think, the reasons that we have gone into in terms of the workshop, which I think is really important. Look, I just wanted to say, Tanya, I found this a very helpful report. In some sense, probably no limited questions because, in fact, it's so informative. But can I just ask probably one, what might appear to be a reasonably minor question? It's about the, after the emergent risks. So I'm on page 32 of the agenda. And I've also appreciated the group risk updates. It's so comprehensive. It's great. Can you just explain to me about the tender panel potentially entering a physical works contract for $8.1 million co-funded by Waka Kotahi without the security of this funding? There may be a bit more of a backstory to this than I get, but I'm just, I guess, wondering why we would enter a contract if we didn't know where the funding was coming from.
Through you, Chair, could I invite Jamie to make a quick comment on this one?
Yep. Jamie.
Through the chair. So you'd be aware that Waka Kotahi has delayed their funding determinations for the year, and that's obviously put pressure on our ability to deliver on the capital program for the year ahead. So we've been working with the NTA have been working with us to come up with some approaches to ensure that we have sufficient probity and overview of the procurement activity, but to get on with the job of delivery. So we had a workshop, essentially a discussion with the chief executive, where we made the call that the best way forward is to begin the procurement process with really and being very explicit about the fact that the funding is yet to be determined, and that no contracts are let until that funding had been secured. So that was, navigating that middle path. So there is inherent risk in that around things like their ability of potential tenderers to engage in the process, the amount of effort they put into costing the work that may lead to variations down the track because, we've got a price that is a little underbaked. We're really aware of those, and the evaluation team are doing their utmost to work through those things. But the key thing is that no contract is being let without the funding being in place.
Brilliant. Look, thanks, Jamie. That's very helpful. I've got to say, I assumed that was the backstory, but I do think it's possibly worth recording in the minutes that is the case. Otherwise, it does raise a modest question about why we're entering a contract, because that would I would suspect, be relatively high risk to the ratepayer given our FAR rate. So I guess that would be there. Wilbur, you want to comment, because I do have one other query, but
mine's a separate point. If I could, Bruce, thank you.
Okay.
But Bruce, could I just ask that maybe Jamie throws something in the chat so that we can pick that up in a minute?
Yeah, if you could just make a note of that, Will. Just reminding everybody, we are on actually item 5.2.
Have I missed that? Sorry, John.
21. You went a bit too far there, Bruce. You went to item 6.1.
Okay. Sorry, my mistake, John. I've set us quite wrong on that. I've had my go. I'll be quiet. Sorry.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair Busich. I just had a couple of questions. Tanya, thank you for this report. I just want to support adopting this emerging risk onto the risk dashboard. I noted that that's one of the questions. My first question was around the recommendation of 3 monthly risk progress reports, and I'm just keen to hear the justification behind that. It's good to see the frequency of that, but I'm just trying to understand where that comes from. And then the other part of it's more a comment actually, the question is, where are the gaps and what more could we be doing? Going forward, I'd be really keen to see some outlining in terms of opportunity risk that comes from Project Darwin. So acknowledging that it's a high-level strategic piece of work, that there is a lot of dependency across the organisation through all departments on this, and the potential bow wave that could be caused across the organisation from delays and things. So that was just a gap that I thought could potentially be filled in these reports going forward, but I'd be keen to hear your feedback on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, for that very positive feedback on the report. I selected the 3-month frequency because it means every alternate ARF meeting, this will be on the agenda as a risk progress report. Currently, that is the most frequent frequency that you see the reports coming through to you. And it is a timing that felt effective in terms of keeping you abreast of what is happening in this space, given that it is so important to the organisation. Talking about opportunities, which is part of risk work, our level of maturity as such is that we haven't done a lot of opportunity work with risks within this organisation, and that would be something that I'd be highly delighted to pick up and work with, and be very keen to work with Andy's team to identify those opportunities and to put them into the risk progress reports. And I will continue to work with Andy and his team around the gaps and the bow waves so that we give you full reporting as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Will, have you got your hand up still from previous time?
I have, Chair, and I don't know who's giving more value to the meeting, Bruce or I, asking and answering questions that are not even on the agenda. So.
We'll get there.
I don't give myself another cut, I can assure you. So
let's move on. So
it was a quick question of really for Councillor Court, Deputy Mayor Court, to make sure that I had addressed the issue that Councillor Foy raised infrastructure this morning.
Yep.
On Project Darwin, and kind of just say by way of background that it's really valuable when members flag things up in advance rather than just raise it at the meeting, because it allows us time to give a comprehensive response. And Councillor Deputy Mayor Court's point, I think, was, is there a potential contradiction or juxtaposition between what we're saying in this report and what infrastructure was saying? And I think the answer to it was that the way that we've drafted things, one could read that into it. So Deputy Mayor Court's point is right. I just wondered, had we bottomed that out to a satisfaction?
Thank you, Will. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. So I am in support of this resolution. This is one of the key projects that governance has said is important, Project Darwin. So I don't know if there's any more comments. I'm now going to put it to the vote, unless I hear noises. No. All right. All in favour?
Aye.
Again?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, I shouldn't do
Councillor
that.
Busich. Sorry,
I'm jumping the gun here.
Thank you,
I'm
Chair.
trying to push things along. Will, can you read out the vote again?
Yes, I will when it comes up.
I'm sure it was unanimous, so let's see how correct we got that.
Chairperson Busich.
Yes.
Member Robertson.
Aye.
Mayor Carter.
Aye.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Court.
Aye.
Councillor Radich. We've got Councillor Smith.
Support.
Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
Councillor Tepania.
Support.
Member Edmonds.
Aye.
Member Gardner.
Aye.
Thank you.
Like I got the chocolate fish on that one. It was unanimous. So now we move on to item 6.1. The Insurance Risk and Finance Committee received the report September 2021 Risk Management Report. Do I have a move and a seconder? Thank you, Bruce. And seconder. Thank you. I missed the name, missed the voice.
Stratford.
Councillor Stratford. Thank you. I'll take it as read again. So, comments, please. Questions. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for clarification, are you seeking questions and comments related to all the reports within 6.1, or would you like to take the conversation separately? For clarification, I only have them on one, but I'd just like to.
I was actually taking comments generally from the whole of the reports, but
That's
if
fine.
you want to focus on one, just say which one you want to focus on and then go forward. I do have myself, I do have a comment.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my comments, it won't come to surprise to anybody in relation to ARF 001, the Climate Change Risk Progress Report. And I'm going to be entirely honest and say that it was not my finest moment reading this report. I think I want to signal here, especially Tanya, in your response to the question I asked on the previous report, that I would like for the committee to consider increasing the frequency of this risk report. It is our highest risk, and we're continuing to see an increase in trend to the rating, yet we are still only receiving it every 6 months, and I do have some significant concerns around that. I think from a high level point of view, I'm concerned that as an organisation, as a governance body, we have adopted a strategic approach to address this risk. We've adopted a roadmap which has a very clear-cut implementation plan, and we've gone as far as heavily resourcing that as well. So I am concerned when we have done what I would say are all the right things, we're still seeing an increase in this risk to a point that it is quite significant. I was quite concerned to read through this report that we seem to be leaning toward a regional approach to the way that we address our climate change risk, yet we have gone to the point of adopting one for our district. And it appears that we are almost trumping our district approach with the regional approach. A really good example that I just want to highlight is that on page 37, it points out that there's a plan to select 3 communities with pilot community engagement projects would take place over 3 years, despite having identified around 30 coastal communities that are at risk. It is a very clear implementation point in our roadmap that we would work with all of our communities by this point to come to that, yet we're now saying that we're only going to work with 3 over the next 3 years. So I just really want to signal that I am very, very concerned at this point that we are not setting out to deliver what we have said that we will deliver, or that we have resourced to deliver, because my understanding is we've resourced potentially up to almost $1 million from memory in the LTP towards the roadmap implementation. But when I look at the planned projects, for example, in mitigating this risk, none of those planned projects are in alignment with that implementation plan. So I'd be really keen to hear some commentary on this. I hope that I have communicated my level of concern, especially given that we have been pushing for mitigation opportunities such as including climate change in the compliance schedule to ensure that our climate change roadmap, the implementation plan and the consideration of this risk is run right across the organisation and embedded into the culture. This report, unfortunately, at the moment does not give me comfort that that is the case, and I'm really keen to hear how we can look to address that. And I don't want to wait another 6 months for another report.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Smith. I'm going to ask Tanya to respond to that, but after that we have Councillor Stratford and Mayor Carter put their hands up as well. So Tanya.
Through the chair, the frequency of the reports is a decision the committee is welcome to take. So if the committee wishes to have those reports at a greater frequency, we have reviewed that, and we would, if we were having the risk workshop, it would have been reviewed again as a part of that risk workshop. So I'm very happy to be guided by this committee to the frequency of those reports, because those reports are for to enable your governance of these risks. With regard to the other aspects of your questions, I'd like to defer to the subject matter expert and ask Darren Edwards if he'd like to respond to that progress.
Yep, I'm happy for that. And I think, Will, do you want to respond to that question as well?
Yeah, all I was going to say was that the easy part of it is to get Tanya to do more regular reporting and to add something to the compliance schedule. The more difficult part is actually addressing the issue at hand, how we combat climate change.
Thank you. I think it will. Darren, you were going to add as well comments.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Tanya. Rachel, thanks for the question through you, Chair. And you're right to be concerned. Climate change is something that we constantly put forward as being our #1 priority, and yet, as I would say, that the response seems to be wanting and continues to be wanting. And so, part of the challenge for us will be setting about how we ensure that we implement the roadmap, which was signed off earlier this year. So, I take little satisfaction from the fact that the level of confidence is low, but only seek that we ask for some time so that I can establish the issues that we have at hand. We have 1 FTE allocated to climate change for our council. That hasn't actually had a lot of traction, as that person has been required to pick up a lot of overhang and lag from his previous role. That's not an excuse. That's simply a fact that really needs to be put out there. So no excuses from me, just we'll do better is the commitment.
Thank you, Darren. I'm going to, before I go to Councillor Stratford, I just want to point out that this is actually a risk discussion we're having. So we identified climate change as risk. Councillor Smith has correctly identified that the risk appears to be increasing, and therefore there's a concern. But there's a delivery there's a delivery arm as well, and how we mitigate and what are we actually doing. So I think there's more than just looking at the risk to solve the problem. There's actually action needed as well. So we go to Councillor Stratford.
Thank you, Chairperson. The only one that I wanted to speak to amongst these 4 reports was the climate change as well, because I feel there's a risk within climate change that is missing, and it might just be me, but I feel that as an elected member, I don't have certainty around decision making with a climate change lens. And I really have to, tautoko what William said about having the, what's it called, the compliant climate change included in the compliance schedule. Other councils do it. Okay, we take guidance from Local Government Act, but other councils have it because it is an emergency. It is something that we need to be turning our minds to across every facet of council. And we shouldn't have to ask at every report, like, for example, I wasn't at the meeting, but I heard, the Hihi wastewater treatment plant. There was not enough consideration, or if any at all, given by in that report in consideration of climate change impacts. And we should be having this on every report so that we can make effective decisions for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. Mayor Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And can I just make 2 points? I do wish that, and in the future, if we can have David Clendon, when a report like this comes up, on hand, because he's actually keeping abreast of it from a central government, local government perspective, and he would have been able to give us an update. My understanding is, Rachel, part of the reason why you've raised the issue about how involved we are, my understanding is it's part of the move to centralise as opposed to allow local input. Now, David would be able to answer that, I can't, but I just think that's one of the things that we do need to double check, and because it is really important that we have local input, and hopefully we can continue to do so. That's not taken away from us. I just wanted to make those points. But if we can check with David in the future, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Carter. And so my comments, I had issues around climate change as well, and the reason is that it is so far-reaching. I think there is a little bit of confusion about, as we've seen today, in my opinion. One is there's identifying the risk. There's also then saying, what do we do about it? How, what are the risks to council which have been identified? Of course, the risks are far-ranging, and also there's also legislation that's coming from government and elsewhere that we're going to be compliant with, and we have to be compliant with. So I do wonder, and I'd rather not make any suggestion here, but I do wonder, looking at Sean, that you've heard the elected members' concerns and various concerns that you come back to us with a ways forward on this, because there's obviously been some expressed concern that we're not progressing. Now, as I said, that's aside from identifying the risks and what it means and rating it. So, Sean, do you, comments from you? I see you raised your hand, and I don't think I've got comments that from anybody else. And then after that, I'll put it to the vote.
No, look, it's a good conversation, which I agree with. I mean, this is, as Darren has said, the biggest issue the North is facing, but it's also the biggest issue that the world is facing. And one of the clever bits of work that this elected membership did was count climate change as one of just 4 of our many issues that will be dealt with regionally in a collaboration, because wouldn't it be silly to have 4 councils independently reinvent the wheel around climate change? I see Rachel might have something to say about this. But I go back to Mayor Carter's comment that Councillor Clendon's carrying the leadership on that for us, and maybe the thing we can do for Councillor Smith is get a bit more visibility of what's being done by and for us in a collective that's not just about our council anymore. We take redirection on any of that, but at the moment we're quite committed to a 4-party approach to the climate change issue for our region, which is connected nationally with the issue, because that's also where it sits in New Zealand. As for Kelly's comment, I quite like that. We might be able to look at that, Darren, just in terms of the schedule on each of the papers. to see whether we're at least casting an eye on, for every issue, passing it through the lens of, so what for climate change? That's not a bad idea.
Thank you. Did you raise your hand again, Councillor Smith? If you did, very quickly.
Very quickly, thank you, Councillor Vucic. Firstly, to respond to our CEO, the direction that's been given has been at a district-wide level. It was a Far North District Council climate change roadmap that was adopted and resourced. And yes, while Council did agree to join the Northland Working Group, there was never a decision made to trump our district approach by the regional approach. So I'm happy to take that conversation offline further if you prefer. Chair Vucic, I would like to follow up and pick up on the point that Tanya made around increasing the frequency of the reporting. I'm not sure what needs to be done, but I just would really appreciate a very quick decision by the committee as to whether or not we should be increasing to 3 monthly, given the urgency and significance of this risk. Thank you.
I would like to take that offline, given what we've got, because that'll enter another discussion. And talking about risks and doing some mitigation, as I'm said, are different things. And I think the real concern is wanting to see the strategy and climate change being implemented. So if we wait on that one, because we can change that, Tanya, we can have that discussion, and we can have that discussion with elected members. And if we need to change the frequency of reporting, we can, but not at this stage. So I'm putting to the vote all in favour of item 6.1.
Sorry,
and,
Chair.
Oh, sorry, we've got Councillor Carter, and then we're going to have Will read out the list again. Councillor, not Councillor Carter, Mayor Carter. Have you got your finger up in the air or not? Just point of order, was it?
No, I was voting.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I think
Casey's
got some clarification, Chair.
Dead strike.
Through you, Chair. I think Casey's got some clarification on the on what we're agreeing. Is that right, Casey?
No, sorry, apologies. I was just saying we can't vote unanimously.
Yeah,
Everyone,
we got that.
all in favor.
All good.
From 3 people now all at once. So, for me.
Member Robertson, Mayor Carter.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Court.
Aye.
Councillor Radich. Councillor Radich. Councillor Smith.
Support.
Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
Councillor Timpania.
Aye.
Member Edmonds.
Aye.
And Member Gardner.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so now move to item 6.2, page, my page number disappeared on that one, 6.2, page 47. And that the Assurance Risk and Finance Committee received the risk progress report for the program of externally funded projects. Do I move a seconder, please?
I'll move or second.
I'll second it then. So that's Councillor Stratford, I believe, and myself. Comments? Any comments on this?
Chair, may I make a quick comment, if I could, by way of introduction? Well, just first of all, a bit of a shout out to Tanya Reid. I've been calling her a bit of a busy bee. I cannot begin to tell you how much work Tanya's been getting through in recent weeks. In addition to her day job on risk, she's been picking up some assurance work. She's also been working on COVID-19 in terms of the research and the SITREP. So thank you, Tanya, for everything that you've been doing. Specifically with this report, Chair, if I could draw your attention to page 52 and the very first conversation that you and I ever had some 2 years and 2 months ago, when you talked to me about social and sustainable procurement. And it echoes the comments the Chief Executive made this morning at Infrastructure Committee about the tremendous success that Far North Council has had in this space, and a real credit to Andy and to David Clamp and the team working with our social procurement people. We've really not only built great stuff or building great stuff, but we're also changing lives, and I think that's something that's well worth remembering when we look at this report. That's it from me, Chair.
Thanks, Will. Specifically to the subject and any questions. So I've got member Bruce has got his hand up.
Thank you, John. Look, I just again would take on board your point, Will. From what I read, it's impressive. And I support. Can I just ask one question, please? Better check I'm on the right item, page 50. I think we're still on the right topic for once. Well, you got to check that. The impact on rates, and I note to be completed is the model the economic benefit to ratepayers and the ability to earn income in the future from these projects. That talks to me strongly about understanding who is the operator of these assets, if there is an operator, and are they incentivised to maximise that on our behalf? Can I just ask perhaps a broad question from these, because I mean I've only got one line items here and I may be asking dumb questions. Are there operators associated with any of these assets, and how do we incentivise them to, even if it's ourselves, to maximise the economic benefits if they are simply that we make full use of it and get our rental income off it?
Is that one that is that one that Andy might want to pick up?
Certainly, I'll have a crack. Certainly, a lot of these projects, if we go back to the first bout of COVID and the funding initiatives, then a lot of the it was effectively a significant and piece of work in putting these bids together for funding, and I think it was done within 2 or 3 weeks. So it was a bit of, for want of a better word, of a lolly scramble. So we were, as a council, we were very successful in that lolly scramble and got not only council but our community bids. A lot of them were supported and funded. I think the question now, Bruce, is how we minimise the long-term impact upon ratepayers around the operation and maintenance of these. And this is a piece of work we're looking at carefully now. But the focus has been the focus so far is on how do we deliver those within the timescales and milestones of the funding agreements with MB. That's the biggest risk to knock off at the moment. And then we, as part of that, we will start looking at the long-term maintenance and operational costs.
Brilliant. Look, thank you for that, Andy. And I certainly understand the pressure things going, to the extent that these are ones for which you could expect an income or an economic benefit, however that's defined. I would be interested to know in future reports how we are going to capture those. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Thanks, Bruce. That's a very good question. Member Edmund.
Thanks. I just had to find the microphone button. High risk, number 8 and 9, page 53. I noticed that they're in the design phase, yet each of them has a high risk in red, so that's high. I mean, and it's a great big red flashing beacon to me, and it looks bad. Both due to cost overruns or insufficient budget. Yet, if they're in the design phase, surely that risk is, that's the risk there. I mean, are these people, are these external organisations blindly going forth and ignoring the difference between their design and the money at the end, and therefore it's high risk, or is there something else going on? And I just wonder how closely the council is working with the organisations, and what evidence do they have that puts both these things at high risk?
So, Member Mike, if I can respond to number 9, you probably I'm on that board, and they have been working close to council. I think that's a bit out of date, because they have gone through and did as that states and looked at and made, in fact, as a board decision that that will be within budget. They're not to spend any more than what's actually in the budget. So maybe it's lagging a little bit. So that definitely is being looked at in that case. I'm not sure about next. So if we can look into...
So the red is simply out of date, is that right? I mean, so it's
I'm thinking that the response we've got, Griffiths is the group that's been associated with that, working through it, and they said I've never seen so much upfront funding in you know, in projects such as this, i.e. sports complexes. So and they have recalculated the price. So that's what they're looking at.
Sorry to disagree with you, John. I guess the reason I asked this question is that this is effectively an operational report coming to a governance body, and I'm getting the answer from governance. Okay, so I'm getting the answer.
Then I'll hand over to Sean. Other things in there that need a respond to in that regard. And then I've got another question similar lines as Bruce. But anyway, Sean.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. No, this is a really welcomed report. I'm really glad that we've got this on governance radar. We've entered into a regime that's not usual for councils, and that is about multiple funding sources for quite big projects. And we find ourselves as often the only party in the room with big program or project management experience, because there's a lot to that, sitting alongside other parties that include really invested community groups who we're working really closely with to deliver these projects. The risks here are real. And the good news is for most of these projects, these are the ones which we've not given the lead to FNHL for, by the way. There are 22 projects all up. So the ones you have on your screen are the ones that we're dealing with more directly. And because this is a public forum, I don't really want to get into the commercial and confidence aspects of the items 8 and 9. But suffice to say, there's been some really deliberate work being done in those two by myself and by Andy Finch, even within the last week and a half. And we've had the assistance of Councillor Vucic on both of them, and Councillor Clendon on number 8. So I can give you more details out of session, but suffice to say they've still got some significant vulnerabilities to them. And we're taking very definitive action around getting the financials for those projects looked at really closely before we get into the thick end of spending. Happy to provide more information elsewhere.
So my question is similar to what Bruce asked before, and that is we've jumped at the funding of the money. I want to point out item 2, the physical work has started, and it refers to the Waipapa Sports Hub. Why I suspect it's green, and I need to ask this question, is that it is not actually doing a whole sports club build at that point, because I don't think you have a whole of funding model worked out yet, and you're working on the design. So is that correct? Is that the reason it's green? Whereas with the other projects, that they actually are looking at a whole of project costing and then looking through that final total cost.
The reason it's green is because we don't have funding partners in that project. We've got some loose ends to tidy up, but Deputy Mayor Court and I have been working on that recently with some terms of reference for their working group, and she's given me a task to carry out before that's stitched up. And you'll see that point in the list of mitigations in the table above the coloured table. These are some form that we're putting around each of the projects to secure them, but that's now looking pretty good in terms of how we define the footprint for Waipapa Sports Hub and how the working group works within that for its recommendations and advice back to council as we progress. And it's phased in a way where we've got the first phase funded and the others transparently not yet funded. It allows us to have a sort of roadmap of what's possible in the future. Elected members are still making all the decisions. The big decisions about those will come back to council if we have any impasses as we go, but it's in better shape than it's been. So I'm confident that Waipapa Sports Hub deserves to be the colour it's at, Yep.
The funding partner is TGF, and as it's not a complete build, as I understand, so there's not that. It's a much smaller project you're talking about. But
Yeah,
anyway,
simple. Yep. Go
it's
ahead.
yeah. So
Sorry, John. I mean, I know. Let's go back to my question. So now I've got two different answers on the table, right? I've got the answer from the CEO that 8 and 9 deserve to be read, and I got an answer from the chair that the red is out of date. Okay, so what is the correct answer to? Is it red, and why is it red if it's only in the design stage and it can be designed to be within budget? I mean, is the external party being belligerent away? Is simply eyes too big for their belly, and therefore the council will have a risk of having to pay out more than they originally allocated? What is the risk here? That because they're in the design stage. I mean, and it is already. I mean, so is it green? Is it orange? Or is it red? Is it out of date or is it not?
I just don't think our team has brought the chair up to. This is moving quite quickly. Even within the last 8 hours, I've sent emails to Infrastructure and Asset Management to Andy, just as we reorganise ourselves around these two red projects. So it's very, very current. I just don't think we've brought the chair up to speed on the risk state at the moment. There's some very definite things happening in this space. And what I could say to you, Mike, is that if there is a single theme, because there are multiple elements to the risk around each of these projects, but if there's a single theme, it's about the financial viability of the defined outcome. Because very little has been spent on either of these projects yet, but we're about to hit that point, and there's quite a lot of value engineering going on in one, and there's a financial forecast review about to be launched on the other, because we need to shore this up before we start committing. Nothing worse than getting 3/4 of the way through the project and running out of cash. So, and this is a risk that we understand well as practitioners of this stuff. That's all I can offer.
I've got Councillor Stratford putting a hand up. There's no, as I understand, there's no build going to happen unless you've got the cash for the whole lot of it. So I don't think that's the risk. So Councillor Stratford.
Thank you. Thanks, and Member Edmonds raises some great points there. I have been wanting to have a workshop with what are they called? Sportsville and all the parties, and also NACS. As an elected member, I've got a real appetite to have them in front of us, please. So I'm not sure if that needs to happen at a separate workshop, or whether there'd be time made at an ARF workshop. Probably not time made at an ARF workshop, because we are already constrained for time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. They've made that request of council to be able to speak to councillors, by the way, again, on my position on the board. So you'll be pleased to hear that. So do I have another question, Sean?
Yeah, just a comment to answer Councillor Stratford. The PSG, or Program Steering Group, which sits has oversight of all 22 projects, and I'm sure the chair there would be happy to have that conversation with you, because we do meet on the last Friday of every month and get reports on all of these projects. So I'm sure that can be facilitated.
So just to be clear, it's not the PSG that I want to hear from. It's the those organisations, those community-led organisations.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford.
We
sure
bring
they can be arranged.
We do bring them into those meetings. That's the program managers for those projects come into those meetings. Increasingly, we're getting them to deliver directly to the governors with us in the room. By the way, Jamie, we might just add into this document the need to formally constitute the PSG. I think that might be a dropped ball. It's working really well, but I don't think it's got sanction from council. Could we just check on that? Thank you.
Noted.
Yeah, just so I think we've had a good debate on this, and I'm going to put the vote. Any other questions? I want to make one other comment. What I'd love to see in terms of risk is that when we do a project, and in fact, in my background, I've seen this done in almost every case. I'm a bit surprised we're not doing it. And that is with every project from its inception to its completion, we do a whole of project cost and accounting into it. Like, that's the only way I can see that we can then correctly show to ratepayers the total potential risk that they may be facing in terms of spend. And I'd like to see that tidied up. So if we can call out the voting, I'd say aye.
Aye.
Mayor Carter?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Support.
Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
Councillor Tapania.
Aye.
Member Edmonds.
Aye.
Member Gardner.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. So carried. If we move to item 6.3, and that's on page 58. And that is, move in a second for that, please. And that's
I'll move, Councillor Stratford.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. Seconder was?
Councillor Smith.
Councillor Smith, thank you.
Thank you. So comments on the council financial report. I'm going to take it as read again. Do we have comments?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And that was Councillor Stratford. Did you say yes?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Smith first and then Councillor Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a couple of questions. My first one being on page 65, there is a statement, Waipapa Sports Hub project ongoing from last financial year, which will require carryover budget to be approved by council in September and budget retimed. My question is if we could have a little bit more clarity around what that means and why budget is being retimed, also highlighting that as a member of the working group, we have been having some struggles with getting clarity around the budget, which is what's prompted my question. So if I could just get some clarity around what that means, when the timing is and what that process looks like, that would be great. I also had some questions in relation to page 69. The first one was, I was just looking for a bit of commentary around the reasonings for central government capital income, new work, central government subsidies tracking well under budget, so why that might be. Also contractor fees and rates for emissions are well up in OPEX, and just wanting some commentary around that as well. Thank you.
So who can respond to that?
Chair, I'm going to ask Janice or Angie to try and pick up the 3 points raised by Councillor Smith.
Thank you.
No worries. Through the chair, the Waipapa Sports Hub project, we would have accounted for the money from the government in last year, so we will need to have that carry forward. It will form part of our carry forward report when that comes through, probably in October now, because I don't think it's going to make September. And then the retiming just means that we need to put it into the right month so that we get the right reporting.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up point of clarification then. Thank you for that, Janice. I was just a little bit confused as to why it was only the sports hub. So, for example, why there aren't other projects that we haven't spent the money on, such as the domain, that need to be carried forward. I'd just like some clarification on that. Thank you.
I can't answer that question, I'm afraid. There are several in here. It would appear that maybe the domain one has already been moved, which I think it was as part of the LTP discussions. Therefore, it's not subject to a carry forward. Would be my only thinking as to why the domain's not showing here. The ones that are showing here are the ones that we hadn't quite got the last year, this year split right.
We can undertake some further research there and get back to Councillor Smith on offline if that's okay.
And page 69, capital subsidies, new works being lower than budget, I would suggest is to do with the Waka Kotahi stuff. I think we will have put in certain subsidy expectations as per the money that we thought we were going to get, but because of the delay in approving the budgets, we haven't actually got any spend yet. Rate remissions, that is higher than, I think what we've done is we've timed that budget into equal parts over the year rather than putting it into the first part of the year. The remissions that are ongoing all come in at the start of the year, so that maybe just needs some tidying up to stop this looking the way it does. And what was the other one? What was the other question?
I think that was it, Janice. There were 3 points.
Contractor fees. Thank you.
Being higher than budget. Again, that might just be the way that we've got them showing, and the fact that that is where some of the Three Waters reform and the EasyO money will be showing, and we maybe haven't got it timed correctly.
Thank you. Councillor Stratford, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. And Councillor Smith covered a couple of the ones I was going to raise, but I also wanted to take the opportunity to mention that ratepayers are very pissed off that they're receiving penalty letters for the rates that they weren't able to pay over lockdown period. And I wish that we had had a chance to, postponement of penalties so that it wasn't going to create more anxiety and stress and pressure for people. And I mean, you're probably going to refund them, but wouldn't that be, it would have been less hassle, less stress for them and for probably you guys if we'd done an extraordinary meeting and done a postponement of rates. So can we try and make sure that we address this in future? Thank you.
Points noted there from Councillor Stratford, Chair.
Could I make comment on that, please?
Please.
We are sending out bulk remission letters today or tomorrow to 261 ratepayers who paid on or before the 30th of August. We contacted every single person who in the previous instalment run had paid at the council offices. So we did everything we could to contact them and to talk them through alternative payment options, as we knew that they couldn't get into the office. I'm not sure why some people have not paid the first instalment through their normal processes, or why they've lapsed. So the debt management team are contacting them at the moment to find out what the issues are and can we help. Legally, we are obliged to charge penalties on the date that we state we will charge them in our funding impact statement, which is on the 27th of August.
Can I? Unless we do unless a resolution is done by council to postpone it, which was what many councils did across the country. And can I just tell you that so some people, although the wage subsidy is payable, for many it's only 60 or 75% of their normal wage amount. So many people needed to just wait. And then some people didn't actually get paid their subsidy until their employer received the amount. So a couple of the places that have contacted me, that's why they didn't pay theirs. Another couple they just really are averse to paying things online, or they don't even have internet, so they can't pay online. And noting, I think, who is everywhere open today?
Yes, there should be.
Our council offices. So 30th of August was last week. Most offices opened this week.
I think Kaiko's not open.
Yeah, that's right.
I go back to what I said before. If they're averse to paying online and they've previously paid in the offices, we would have contacted them. If we were unable to make contact, we put a penalty inhibitor on anyway. So I'm surprised that they have happened, because the team made over 700 phone calls in a week to those customers that had previously paid over the counter at any of our service centres.
Thank you, Janet.
I have lodged an RFS on this.
Thank you,
follow
Councillor
up
Stratford.
because
I've heard complaints as well along the lines that Councillor Stratford is raising. And I did drop an email and I did get some response back that we're trying to do what we can. Will, were you going to make a quick comment?
Just very quickly, I really appreciate the comments that Councillor Stratford's making and yourself, Chair. What I will say about Janice and her team, they've tried to be both professional and empathetic at the same time. We're very cognizant of the government's message about be kind. And it's not just a case of them's the rules. We've really tried to be as kind as possible. And just yesterday, for example, there was an elderly gentleman contacted His Worship the Mayor, and Janice and I personally took the call, sought to resolve it, and to the satisfaction of the individual concerned. So it is trying to strike that balance.
Thank you, Will. No other comments? No. All right, I'm going to put up the voting, please. And it's aye from me. I think I'm first on the list.
Aye.
Mayor Carter. Deputy Mayor Court.
Aye.
Councillor Radich.
Aye.
Councillor Smith.
Aye.
Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
Councillor Tepania.
4.
Member Edmonds.
Aye.
Member Gardner.
Aye, and please note my question in the chat as well, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed that. Then
thank you.
Mayor Carter, will you all vote in favour?
Oh, I'm in favour. Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Thank you. So now we move to item 6.4. And that is the Insurance Risk and Finance Committee received the report elected members sensitive expenditure.
Chair, could I just interrupt at the outset? I've just got a message from the report author Rhonda to say that there's been there's a slight amendment to this, and Rhonda's message to me is the report total on EM sensitive expenditure will be $80 less than what is shown on the agenda due to a duplicate entry. We can create a credit line item for $80 on the next EM sensitive expenditure report.
Okay, noted. Thank you. So, do I have a move and a seconder for item 6.4? So that's Carter and seconded by Kelly. Councillor Stratford. I'll take it as read.
Yep.
Can I just say something, John?
Yes, Matty.
Yeah, I'm pleased it's back on the agenda. What worries me about this sensitive elected expenditure, who goes on these conferences? And this is the 4th time I've asked and was hoping to get some answer. And it hasn't come forward. For instance, there's one councillor who's been on 4 courses this year. 4 conferences, plus 1 trip to Wellington. Now, I've been a councillor for 11 going on now 12 years, and God only knows how I survived, but I'm still here. And I was only asked once during Wayne Brown's time as a mayor to go to a conference in Wellington, and unfortunately we didn't go because the mist had set in at Kirikiri Airport, and that was the end. We didn't fly out. But who makes these decisions? Is it all about mates or what?
I'll answer that, and maybe some staff can answer that as well, Matthew. I understand there is a program within council which is looking at governance training, and a lot of that is to do with governance training. I've been on one of them myself, and I'd encourage that personally. I think that's great, improve governance overall, and you ought to have been contacted. The governance support team, I believe, have contacted all elected members. I see, Will, you've got your hand up, and then Councillor Stratford. Will?
Thank you, Chair. That was your latter point was the one I was going to say, that Caroline has been going round, as she does every year, with elected members, looking at well, what your training and development needs are, what conferences that you would wish to go on. Sometimes elected members go on conferences which are not where the root cause of where the root trigger rather is not from the council itself, but it may be from another body, a national body, for example. And that's sometimes an explanation as to why members are invited to conferences. They're not always necessarily representing the council itself. But,
thank you, Will. Can I just add, can you make a note to ask Caroline to give Councillor Ryder a call? Just to ensure
I certainly will do. I think she has already, but I'll certainly do that if she hasn't.
No, hang on there. No, she hasn't.
Okay, I'll certainly do that.
No, look, what you just said is irrelevant to me. No, that's, to me, is rubbish. And also in regard to you talking about governors, John, there are a lot of conferences there that not involve governors, but involved other things. And I think the simplest solution to this should come from you, Mayor Carter, or you, Sean, is that you put a list in chambers or something and just say, well, look, this is what's coming up. Who's interested? Because this is ratepayers' money.
And I do that often, and I don't get a reply from a lot of people.
Thank you, Mayor Carter. Yep, I remember being in a.
I can't win with you guys. I just can't win with you guys. You don't do that often, John, because I haven't heard it. I'm going to say all you have to do is to put up a list or say to people, these are the conferences that are on, etc., etc. Not that I want to go on, but it's just about fairness. You know, why should this certain councillor go on 4 conferences this year?
Maybe it's not about who goes and who doesn't.
It isn't. That's an important point, John. That's important. It is about who goes on. Get real, you people. Get real.
Sean, were you going to respond? And then I got Kelly Stratford to respond.
Oh, point of order, Maddie. If you want to go on something, you actually need to be the one who takes the step forward to let council know that you want to go on that.
You don't get it done.
Everyone gets to go on a conference a year. You go out and find one and you go on it. Council will support you to go on it.
No, you don't get it. You don't get it. We don't know what conferences there are. We don't know I don't know what conferences are. Which of them are on? For you to say,
Matty, yeah, just so we'll do that. We'll get that list to you, Matty. There's no problem in doing that. We'll get that to you. Councillor Stratford.
Unbelievable. What an outfit. Just before Councillor Stratford gets on, there's many other things that...
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Councillor Tepania has also raised one, so if you could please rule.
I think he was saying that that Matty can go on those lists and he can. So, Councillor Stratford.
Yes, thank you. So we have the opportunity to go on one conference a year and training that is applicable to portfolios. And I'm actually heading off to the water conference. It was meant to be next week, but it's been postponed due to COVID to sometime in October. And so I still have the Three Waters portfolio and I probably will still have it after that conference because I find when I do get an opportunity to go to the conferences, like I went to the LGNZ one a couple years ago, it just reinvigorates my enthusiasm for a topic, re-stimulates my senses so that I can do my job really well. Yesterday, I did not feel like doing my job, but luckily we're working from home and we can turn the camera off. But, you know, it all gets a little ho-ha at times, like me giving Will and Janice shit about the finance before. You know, we're getting shit out there. So I really appreciate the cost is funded by ratepayers for me to go on things, but it helps me do my job as a councillor. And I thank you very much for the process that's in place. And I found that advertisement for the water conference myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edmund, Councillor Court, and then Member Edmund.
Thank you, Chair. I just felt it was important because this meeting is being live streamed.
Yep.
To acknowledge that we have some incredibly hardworking councillors who have some incredibly important portfolios. And without trying to pick winners and losers, I know that Councillor Stratford is passionately interested in civil defence and Three Waters, and accordingly attends conferences and brings the lessons learned back to add value to the organisation. It is also a requirement that a written report is supplied that provides evidence of the value that the ratepayers' investment in that conference is bringing back to the organisation through lessons learned.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Are organised through their external appointments, which is agreed at the beginning of the triennium. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I'm very passionate about governance training and lifting the, as you well know, and as all of you know, that lifting the bar on governance overall. And I'd be delighted to actually have all of our councillors attending governance training. And I do believe the conferences are crucial as well. So we have Member Edmund and then Sean.
So I'd like to agree with you, John. I went on a risk essentials workshop with the directors or the Institute of Directors, and I had to find that myself. I thought to myself, I'm on the risk committee, this one here, and I'd like to know more to be able to do a better job. And the $1,000 that it cost will pay itself back many times. So, and I expect it to be the case of every course that every one of the members goes on. And if we are indeed committed to our jobs as elected members, then I think we should be looking for ways and looking for conferences and looking for our courses on our own time or on our own cognizance that we can go to. Just to have conferences on a list that we pick up is not the point. It's just not the point. And I also like to make the point. I read an article the other day about the phrase "ratepayers' money." Okay, and it made the point there is no such thing. Once the ratepayers have paid their rates, it is council money, pure and simple. And so and the writer made the point that when anybody uses the word ratepayers' money, okay, they have an agenda. They don't want it spent or something like that. But there is no such word. Ratepayers' money doesn't exist. It's the council's money. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, do you want to make a comment quickly?
Just very quick, thanks for the information. For those who spoke most recently, the professionalisation of governance is really important in any organisation, and this is an investment for the ratepayer that's ongoing. I just remind us all that there was no system, and therefore there was no basis for an intelligent conversation like this about what's being spent, what the equity is. There were no rules around who could bid, and there was no budget struck for the professionalisation of governors. So we forget where we come from, but this is a really fine thing that's going on at the moment. And for those who want to take part in it, you have our full support. And for anyone who's not currently taking part in it, you're most welcome to re-engage. Would be open-minded. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. If you can bring up the voting again. So I say aye.
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 Councillor Smith.
Yeah,
Support.
Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
Councillor Tipania.
Aye.
Member Edmund.
Yep.
Member Gardner.
Aye.
Did I miss anybody?
Ready.
Thank you. So, thanks everybody. I thought that would be a quick one. So now we go to item 6.5 on page 76. Here we go to that. Do I have a mover and a seconder?
I'll move.
Thank you. Seconder.
Second, John. Bruce.
Thank you. Again, I'll take it as read. People and Capabilities quarterly update. Any comments? No comments.
Yep, I have my hand up.
Councillor Stratford and Councillor Smith have their hands up. Chair
you.
Vucic.
Thank you.
To save me trying to go through old reports, it would be helpful if there's something, you know, to gauge these numbers of turnover resignations against. So not just the quarter, it would be, the previous year perhaps, or benchmarking from across the industry. That's just some feedback.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Councillor Stratford. I think that's a good idea. Benchmarking I do like. Councillor Smith, and then Member Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not so much a question as really just highlighting my concern around the low level of uptake on exit interviews. And it's a conversation that we've had at this committee before. I note that there are some active encouragement to increase that participation. And I look forward to seeing that increase. But if there's any commentary supplementary to what's in the report around that space, it would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Bruce.
John, I'd just like to reflect again on both Rachel's point. Well done. I think that's correct about the extent of your analysis. I'd be keen to see more or encouraged to capture that. I just noticed, Kelly, that what does say 14.95% for the year, so at least have the year. For what it's worth, and I'm sure in future reports that might, there may be additional information. That is probably, as we say here, pretty much ballpark, sorry, with what I'm seeing elsewhere around the sector. So when I saw this personally, I wasn't overly alarmed or necessarily thinking it was too high a number. That would be helped if I had better understanding of why people were leaving the organisation. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. That's good. Any other comments? Right, I'll put it to the vote then. I say yes.
Aye.
If we could
Apologies, Mr. Chair. I had asked if there was any commentary around my question, and I noticed that Jill Coyle has raised her hand. So,
sorry, I missed that.
Your response.
We just hold the voting. Jill, can you just give that response?
Yeah, sure. Two things I can respond to. Kelly's, the baseline and benchmarking we will be doing over the year. This is the first year that we've given this report to ARF, so that will be coming in future reports. And yes, Rachel, we've got a concerted effort on with our new structure in the PNC team. Our PNC advisors will be taking a much more proactive approach to getting exit interviews returned through our now new online portal.
Thank you.
So I do expect to see an increase in the exit interview returns.
Thank you. Continuing on, so if you can bring that up again, please. Voting. I don't think we've finished that. Right. Was I from me? It was I from me. Now that was I from Bruce.
Mayor Carter.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Court.
Aye.
Councillor Smith.
Support.
Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
Councillor Tepania.
4.
Member Edmonds.
Yep.
Member Gardner.
Aye.
Thank you. So now we go to item 6.6, and that's on page 79. Do I have a move and a seconder, please?
I'll move it, John. That's Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce. I'll second it then. Comments, please.
If I could make a quick comment by way of context, Chair, and that's to say that we work really hard across all the GMs with the Chief Executive to ensure that there's the minimum outstanding here. As the Chief Executive clarified at a recent meeting, this isn't a collection of everything that each committee has done, it's the outstanding items, and we work hard to clear any backlog.
Yeah, yeah. Your point noted. No comments?
Mr. Chair, apologies, my
Councillor
hand
Court.
up.
Yep.
Councillor Smith, thank you.
And Councillor
just-
Smith, I think. Maybe it's only Councillor Smith. Sorry.
Just from an administration point of view, I note that, and I think that this is a lack of a reflection of my memory strain over the last few months as well. But I note that this resolution was that ARF committee had recommended to council for the adoption of this policy, which I note came through strategy and policy yesterday and we amended. So just a little bit of confusion. I just want to clarify that from an administrative point of view, we're still on the right track. I know that that policy went backwards and forwards a few times, but if there's any clarification that anyone can offer me, that would be great. Thank you.
Chair, I think wiser heads than my own, i.e. Casey's, can assist.
Casey, I noticed Casey. Casey?
Through you, the chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Smith, for raising that. These agendas and this action sheet update was ran before the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting, and it was in your hands before that committee met as well. So this is on track to be escalated to the council meeting on the 23rd of this month.
Councillor Court,
Thank you, Casey. Just noting that we do now have 2 recommendations from 2 committees over 1 policy. So I don't know if that presents any issues because one has an amendment and one doesn't.
Could I just pass a
Sorry,
comment
so
here?
the amended. Oh, yeah.
Casey, originally we put this through the Assurance Risk and Finance Committee because we were looking at the policy in relation to Far North Holdings. And at that meeting, we had that discussion that said it was wider than just Far North Holdings, and the paper was actually transferred to your committee at that meeting. So this is just closing off an outstanding issue on the Assurance Risk and Finance actions.
Thank you, Janet.
And just to confirm, sorry, through you, the chair, that the amended resolution will be what is on your paper for the council meeting on the 23rd.
Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Court, did you actually have your hand up before? Did I misread it? Yeah, you didn't. Shaking your head. Thank you very much. So I'm going to put this to the vote then. So to bring up the voting, so it's aye for me. Member Bruce.
Aye.
Aye for me.
Aye for me.
And next.
Support.
Support.
Aye.
Councillor Stratford, Councillor Tapania.
Aye.
And Member Edmonds.
Yep.
And Member Gardner.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the public session. Now, bit of advice. I'm going to move into public exclusion, and given we've been going for some time, do we need a break?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll move that we go into public exclusion.
Happy to second.
I'll second.
And then we can have a break, and for the reasons as outlined in the agenda there. So do I have, we've got the mover and seconder, and put that to the vote, please. So it's aye from me, from Mayor Carter, and aye from Bruce.
Aye.
Councillor Court, Deputy Mayor Court.
Deputy Mayor Court.
Aye.
Councillor Smith.
Support.
Councillor Stratford.
Aye.
Councillor Tapania. Member Edmonds.
Yeah.
And Member Gardner.
Aye.
Okay. So now going to public exclusion. So 10 minutes. we're back. So if I can ask you to do closing karakia, Moko.
Kia ora, thank you, Chief Research. May the sanctity of the words that we've spoken today resound within the walls of our houses and the walls of our minds. Ko te tapuonga kōrero ka irihia ki ngā pātu o te tātou whare, ki ngā koko mahara tūturu a ka maua kia tīna, haumi e hui e tāi ki e. Kia ora.
Kia ora,
Thank you, everybody. So that brings our session
Thanks,
to
everybody.
end. And thank you. I think I'd prefer the snow at the moment, Bruce, than this wind and the rain.